You're trying to learn a piano piece you love and it's taking months and it's getting dull. In this video, I want to propose a rule for you to follow when you're practicing piano, that if you really took to heart and practice with the utmost discipline, will help you to learn your songs and pieces within days, perhaps within hours rather than weeks or months. On surface level, this will sound like very common sense talk, but I want to suggest you to stick to the end of the video to listen to my in-depth explanation and see it in demonstration. I promise this will be a game changer for you, like it is for many of my live students. So here's the rule. When practicing, do not allow yourself to play wrong notes. This rule is so important in my personal practice. I'm just going to say it one more time. Do not allow yourself to play wrong notes. And I mean this in a relatively strict way. So I want you to imagine you're playing a game with yourself when you're practicing, and the moment you strike a single wrong note, it's almost like you'll be electrocuted or that you have to do 100 push-ups as punishment if you strike even a single wrong note. Let me explain what I mean. Many of our subscribers, or even some of my own students, practice in this way. I know this because I observe them during the lesson, and I'm seeing how they work and how they hone their parts. This is where they're trying a passage for 10th time, trying to kind of nail it on the 11th time. In my personal opinion, this is not the best way to work. It's based on a terrible but common misconception that as long as you keep playing it through, eventually it'll be right and you'll get it. During my college and high school teaching days, I was required to accompany many soloists. I had to learn very complicated piano parts in short amounts of times to perform or rehearse with these soloists. I would get the sheet music sometimes just days or maybe even on the day of the performance or rehearsal. Imagine getting sheet music to a performance 60 minutes prior. How would you spend that 60 minutes? You could say that through my training, I was forced to really think about how to spend little time to churn out lots of music. Here's what I found in my training and in my 20 years of piano playing experience. When you're practicing piano, your hands and your brain will retain whatever you execute on the keyboard. If you practiced like this. If you did that for, let's say, 7 times, on the 8th time of trying to execute this, it's likely your hands will do the same thing. If you practiced, however, like this, which is the wrong way. You know, if you screw up the notes, something like this. If you allow unmindfulness and allow your hands to execute wrong notes like that, it's very hard for your brain to understand and know what you want it to retain. As you're practicing, when you attempt a passage 10 times, and you play those 10 times slightly differently each time, your brain gets very confused. It is not sure what exactly you want it to learn. It says to you, "Excuse me, Mr. Pianist, excuse me, Miss Pianist. It seems to me you're wanting me to learn and retain a certain sequence of finger movements. However, you've demonstrated this passage 10 times, but slightly differently each time. Which one do you want me to retain?" Imagine going to a dance class and needing to learn a simple 10-second choreograph. The dance instructor stands in front of you and goes, "Okay, this is how you do it." She demonstrates it 10 times for you to watch and learn. However, in each of the 10 times, she does her choreograph slightly differently each time. Wouldn't that be a little bit confusing for you? Unfortunately, this is how a lot of people practice piano. They unmindfully practice passages in very different ways every time they strike, and their brain gets very confused about what it needs to retain. So here's my method. Play a game with yourself. I want you to practice in small enough sections that you can guarantee 100% note accuracy in. Don't worry about the beat or the rhythm for now. Once you can do 7 times in a row without any note errors, 7 times in a row, then you can expand or extend these sections. This is a piece I literally just learned this morning. It's one of Schubert's impromptus, and there's a lot of passages that help you work on scales. If you like the sound of it, please go and try this one. So let's play the game. The game is to, let's say, start with 4 measures, a very small section. We're going to try hands together first. Let me show you what the goal should be first. 100% note accuracy. So if you're doing something like this, let's say you're practicing and you're making some errors here and there. Let's say if you make errors 2 or 3 times in a row, we want to know that there is a reason for that. We must put our ego aside and just admit that there currently is a level of coordination that our brain is not quite getting just yet. It will eventually, I promise, but not in this current moment. If you're making mistakes, we need to reduce that level of coordination for our brains to prioritize success. We either reduce it to 2 measures, or maybe even 1 measure, or maybe do hands separately. So let's say if we reduce it to 1 measure, it might look something like this. And we will just hone that. We will make sure we can do it 100% correctly. It's not just 7 times, not just small sections, but it's 7 times, it's small sections, and they have to be 100% correct. So as I said before, either reduce the number of measures or do hands separately. Try to teach your hands exactly what it needs to do and rinse and repeat in exactly the same way that you executed the last time. Remember the rule, do not allow yourself to play wrong notes. Give your brain the correct information it needs every single time so it knows what to remember, it knows what to retain in your hands. I would practice that passage for 7 times. If you play a single wrong note in that 7 times, it unfortunately means you haven't quite understood that part enough and you need to restart. You need to make sure you play through 7 times in a row correctly before you can move on. Only when you can do 7 times in a row without a wrong note can you say confidently that you got it. Not 3 times, not 5 times, not 7 times out of 15 tries, but 7 times in a row. Whilst you're doing this, forget about rhythm for a second. So for example, one of my sections down here in the E flat minor part sounds like this. When I was practicing this part, I actually made 8 measures, my little section, and I practiced in this particular way. I did this. I paused, and I tried to prepare each transition. Pause to think. 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 You get the idea. So it's always prioritizing success. I don't allow myself to play a single wrong note. I forego rhythm and beats for now. In each difficult part, I just give my brain a little bit of a rest to make sure I actually understand the coordination I need to execute the next parts. Because I remember that every single note I strike on the piano some of it is getting retained. So I don't want to retain anything wrong. I want to retain all the right stuff. And if I rinse and repeat like this, suddenly I know the parts very quickly, within 5 minutes, within 10 minutes, because I've done it correctly 7 times in a row. If you have the discipline to really do this properly, you will find this works like magic. You'll magically learn passages and sections and entire pieces very quickly, because for once you're finally giving your brain always the correct information to retain into your muscle memory, rather than just giving it correct information sometimes. If you progressively build on this method, Lego piece by Lego piece, you will have a magnificent structure by the end of that practice session. Compound this over 7 days, you would have learned the entire piece and perfected it. I've talked about this method in another video. I called it the AAR method, the absolute accuracy rule. I advise you to really try this, really take this seriously. Sometimes people say this is a little bit boring. I personally think you're doing yourself a huge disservice if you don't practice in this way. Lots of people practice in that kind of trial and error way, practice it 10 times, try to nail it by the 11th time, and they compound this over weeks and months, and I find they eventually hate their piece. I'd rather you, let's say, just suffer for 5 to 10 minutes using this method and actually retain your love and passion for the piece because you actually get it in your hands pretty quickly. Please try this method and let me know in the comments how you go. If you have other ways of practicing that works for you, please share in the comments too. I would love to learn from you, and our pianists around the world would love to learn from you as well. That's it for today's lesson. If you have any other piano questions, please let us know in the comments. Catch you in the next piano tutorial.